Hello, my name is Chuen-Fung Wong. The title of my presentation today is Contesting and Reclaiming Indigeneity in Uyghur Music. This paper concerns the music of the Uyghur, a Central Asian Turkic-speaking, predominantly Muslim people in northwest China. My inquiry stems from a critique, as I wrote in my abstract, that over the past nearly half a century, scholarly and media attention on the performing arts of China's minority nationalities have been guided heavily by inquiries that prioritize issues of representation, cultural policy, and local adaptations. This framework is premised on the model of ethnic pluralism as promoted by the socialist state since the 1950s, and also critiques the state's maneuvering of minority performing arts. And I should also confess that a good number of my own publications over the past 10 or 15 years or so also followed this framework. But what I think is often missing here is a perspective that puts the spotlight on the indigeneity of minority cultural productions. Particularly, I think that there are a lot to be compared and contrasted between the minority musical experience in China and that of what we commonly refer to as the First Nation, such as the indigenous peoples in Taiwan or North America. This is particularly true at a time as the escalating crisis of cultural assimilation and political suppression in the Uyghur territory in China have prompted research to look more closely at the musical experience of the Uyghur and other minorities as one that is shared broadly, a transnational consciousness that resonates broadly with the global indigenous community. In this short paper that I'm presenting here today, I want to look at the ways in which the articulation of cultural ownership, artistic integrity, and creativity in Uyghur performing arts have been informed by notions of indigeneity among Uyghur musicians and their audiences. I will conclude by leaving a brief remark on how such indigeneity is repurposed and reframed in official representation in China. I want to start with a musical example, a song by one of the most beloved Uyghur folk singer. His name is Weli Dawood. The title of the song is Ili Boileri, or the Ili River Bank. Now, for those of you who are well versed in modern Chinese instrumental music, this song should definitely not be confused with the modern Chinese appropriated so-called minority-styled composition for the Zheng zither titled Yili Hepan, or the Bank of Yili River. There is completely no relationship between the two pieces. Now here, the Yili River, or Yili Derliasi, flows from the Tanglita or the Tian Shan Mountains across the northwestern Uyghur territory all the way through the border into southeastern Kazakhstan, and has been a major source of inspiration for a wide range of poetic and artistic works among Uyghur musicians. In no trivial way, the river and its watershed has been the lifeline of the Uyghur and other non-Han peoples in the borderland. The river also serves as a popular metaphor of heritage, miras, and homeland, Veten. It emplaces the national history of suffering, Kupet, which speaks powerfully to the musicians and their audiences today. As an outlet that connects the Uyghur territory to the broader Central Asia, the river is also a symbol of cross-border movements and alliances. And some of you probably were aware of the recent news where villages in Kazakhstan picked up copies of the Quran that had been wrapped in plastic bags floating in the lower stream of the river, believed to be put into the river by the Muslims inside the Chinese border to protect the holy book from being confiscated and burned. Now, this example I'm going to play right now is a famous modern song, or folk song, composed in the traditional style by Nur Mehmet Rossi, based on a poem, a text by Qasim Sadak. So, Ili Boileri. So here's the lyrics. Ecep Gügün, ili boyları, soki küçlük bahar ayları. Yurtumuzun kızıl gülleri, şehitlerinin tüken kanları. So really beautiful, the riverbanks of Ely, delights of the lush months of spring, red flowers of our motherland, shed blood of the martyrs. Ecep otluk, ili boyları. Hikmetke by önkü sayları. Jalanlaydu sadır nakşsı nosugumның yangrak külleri. Really bright, the riverbanks of Ely. Caves along the river valley are wisdom and wealth. Sadır song is sung in the resonant melodies of Nosugum. The stylistic genre, known collectively today as Ely folk song, is marked by highly elaborate melodies and their melancholic subtleties. Uyghur music has had well-established expressive means of connecting the natural world to other domains of human experience. Textual and musical imaginaries of natural landscape abound, referencing mountains, steppes, lakes, rivers in text and images. These songs are also deeply nostalgic of an imagined Uyghur national past. As mentioned, river, Derya, is a recurrent theme in Uyghur literature and music. A number of these rivers in the Uyghur territory, such as the Tarim River and the Ely River that we are talking about right now. I'm showing you a map of where the Ely River is, flowing from northwestern Uyghur territory all the way into Lake Balkhash in southeastern Kazakhstan. These rivers are often metaphorically linked to the Uyghur nation in poetry, novels, and songs. And imaginaries of the riverbank of the Ely River here in the song serve as an anchor in each of the three stanzas of the lyrics, each of which has 4 lines. So each line has 9 syllables and is rhymed throughout. The melody of the song follows a rather typical design found in many modern folk songs of the Ely Valley. It is written in a sour-sounding modal scale that features 2 fluctuating pitches on the sharpened 2nd and the flattened 7th steps. The melody of each stanza is arc-shaped, moving from the lowest register in the first to the highest register in the last. It is driven by a syncopated, somewhat limping rhythm, as you see on the PowerPoint here, in quadruple meter. The rural place reinvented here is also the remnant of a bygone era where martyrs such as Sadr Pauvan and Nosugum, these are legendary 19th century protagonists who resisted against the Manchu or Qing regime, fought and died for the Uyghur people and nation. Connecting among these historical figures to the natural landscapes of the Ely riverbank, the song provided a powerful allegory that speaks to most Uyghur today. In the music video we just watched, scenes of waterfalls, riverbanks, streams, and mountains and steppes are abundant. And the camera pans back and forth between the nature and the singer, who is seen strolling, singing, and sometimes playing a musical instrument. This is a common filming strategy in many Uyghur pop and folk videos. The singer has a deep guttural voice, soaring timbre, and profound intensity, qualities that are highly acclaimed by many in his audiences in Ely. It is accompanied by a trio that is very idiomatic of the tradition of the tambour and dutar, which are the plucked lutes, as well as the bow lute named satar, and also a frame drum called the dap. Overall, his singing also epitomizes what Uyghur scholar Tohun Saudun has described as refinement of Ely folk song, surging, resonant, mournful, and courageous. To many who listen to the songs through a nationalist frame, celebrating and preserving the nature is often not a different commitment from safeguarding the nation and its legacy. The musical subtleties provided an effective template for the emplacement of sentiments in these songs, a powerful claim to the land and places of the Uyghur homeland as they are being destroyed and as the peoples are being displaced. This is also about the hardship, the suffering, and other consequences of living under occupation, a theme that is best represented by a series of so-called historical songs, Tarihi Nashdali, consisting of text and melodies believed to be originated in the 19th century or earlier, and reference specific historical events or figures from the 1760s to 1880s in the Ili Uyghur, of the Ili Uyghur living under the Manchu or the Qing regime. The melodies and texts of most of these songs are often of unknown authorship, despite that musicians sometimes attribute the text to some of the songs listed as Sadr Nakshasi, Sadr's song again to Sadr Palvan, as mentioned earlier, that Uyghur hero who led resistance movement in Ili against the Qing government. These songs are usually performed in medleys, and one of these includes 5 of these historical songs: Wang Hulu, Kuch Kuch Migration, Awang Conscription, Ersteng here, irrigation canals, and Sepil, the war, the city war. All these songs describe the experience of forced migration labor and other hardship endured by the Uyghur and remain hugely popular today. The text of one of these, Ersteng Nashisi, for example, describes the suffering of the Uyghur labor building and repairing over a dozen of irrigation canals during the late 18th century and the early 19th century in Ili. So here is the song. Östengen tegi katık, çapsa ketmen ötmeydu. Salim tongçisi bekle, bishimizden ketmeydu. The base of the canal is hot. If the metal sticks at where it does not pass through, the crew interpreter or the official is not leaving us alone. Östengen tegi laidu, desise legideydu. Salim la chikip kelsa, yulek la Jidedu. The base of the canal is mud. Stepping on it is shaky. When the tyrants come, our hearts pound. So here's the song, and there's a short transcription of the first verse of the song. So where the river symbolized the Uyghur nation, the irrigation canals here speak to a history of suffering of the Uyghur nation that remains highly relevant today. So I want to think about this in contrast in the ways in which traditional Uyghur music is framed in China today. I'm not talking so much about the notorious Orientalist representation of minority exoticism, but more about the ongoing craze for the so-called original ecology Yuan Shengtai movement, where Uyghur and other minority performing arts have been a major part, including the entire repertoire of Ili folk songs that we are talking about here today. The notion of original ecology has its root in the late 1980s as a part of the liberalization of cultural expressions following the end of the Cultural Revolution. It was also fueled by a strong scholarly appeal to salvage and preserve the seemingly vanishing minority cultural traditions. An underlying theme that has characterized much of Chinese music scholarship during the second half of the 20th century and beyond. Many have understood the movement also as a dialectic response to the excessive urbanization, reformist endeavors, and wide dissemination of foreign popular styles, which altogether have threatened the conservation of traditional styles and genres and contributed to their demise. Concerns over the disappearance of musical traditions as a result of homogenization and decontextualization have brought about a heightened sense of cultural preservation. A wide range of minority singing styles are enlisted in this category of original ecology, including Mongolian Ertundu, long song, and Khmer overtone singing, polyphonic singing of the Dong people known as Dage, grand songs, and of course Uyghur traditional music makam or mukam as well. It is notable that these minority performing arts have been mainstays of the numerous original ecology, singing and dancing contests, awards, and showcases held all over the country and have been utilized to represent China on the international stage. Indeed, what connects these various minority traditions across China in the early 21st century today is a process of what I call the ecologization of traditional music, which, with its language of primordial authenticity, keep indigenous music relevant and recognized in the national and global music marketplace. two of four Two of China's four UNESCO proclaimed intangible cultural heritage entries are from the minorities, Uyghur Mukam and Mongolian Long Song, both proclaimed in the year 2005. It is also notable that the other two entries, which are the Qin seven-string cipher and Kunqu operatic singing, represent the most refined of Han Chinese musical and theatrical forms, contrasting sharply with the assumed rawness found in minority music. This echoes a framework that has looked at minority performing arts and their musicians as noble savages through the assumed connection with pre-modern forms of human societies and cultures. To assert the authentic indigenous Chineseness for the global music marketplace in the new century, minority genres that are uncontaminated by outside influences remain some of the most convincing and favored candidates. In this sense, the mimetic approach and aesthetics championed by the original ecology movement work not so much to repeal earlier stereotyping tactics. Minority exotics, despite being operated on a different hierarchy, remain firmly in place in the construction of modern Chinese musical selfhood. The notion of original ecology, in other words, serves more as a discursive trope rather than actual styles or practices. Its manifestation is also highly manipulated by and contingent upon official preferences and representational need. The case of Mokam, which is beyond the scope of this short paper here, also reveals how indigeneity is manipulated in official discourses, in which the history of Uyghur music has sought to historicize modern genres through a multiculturalist framework that highlights hybridity and impurity. And traditions such as Mukam, have been studied as a genre with Buddhist, Islamic, Central Asian, and even Chinese influences, anything but indigenously Uyghur. One recent ethnography on the local Mukam genre in Khotan went as far as suggesting that musical instruments of the ancient Buddhist Khotan, or Yutian in Chinese kingdom, had undergone no essential change despite centuries of Islamic influences. This approach does not only downplay the Islamic and Turkic or Persian influences on Uyghur music, it also contrasts starkly with the monolithic construction of Han Chinese civilization, which is assumed to be homogeneous and indigenous, with long and largely unbroken history. As, as anthropologist J. Dolcher wrote in a very fine ethnography on the Uyghur cultural life in the Iliu Valley, quote, the Chinese state sought to undermine specific practices that bound Uyghur identity to place by literally dissembling the meanings of local identity and then reorganizing those meanings according to its own plan, end quote. What is indigenous and what it means to be indigenous? These are the questions that are asked by many musicians and their audiences, and as they struggle to reclaim their local identities. This is the end of my paper. Thank you very much.